Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome to our Friday lunchtime learning session. I hope you're all really well and that you've got time to listen to this because we're going to have a great session today with CATHY Doherty. Welcome, CATHY.
Hi.
Lovely to have you here. So CATHY describes herself as a nature-loving entrepreneur with a people management consultancy, and CATHY's about to launch 2 new ventures, Wildlife Unlimited, starting with her sleepy tea blend and ritual, and possibly more relevant to us, though not necessarily, Enlightened Boss, which is a membership site for bosses and bosses to be, which I think is really interesting to a lot of us, because my feeling is that quite a lot of people in this group are currently one-woman bands or have small businesses, and maybe thinking of needing to hopefully to expand and take on more, not necessarily employees, but more team members, and perhaps a VA might be the first step. So I think CATHY's going to sort of talk about that. But CATHY, tell us how you actually got to where you are. How did you start off, and what's your journey to where you are now, what you're doing now?
Okay, thanks, Lucy. So I suppose for me it all started way back. So I'll run through it quickly. But my dad started his own firm from our dining room when I was a kid. And I knew at that stage, sitting at his desk, with a big seat, that I would have my own business or businesses one day. Didn't know what they would be. But I saw from a very personal perspective what being a boss entailed and how it impacted on your life, how it impacted on your loved ones, your quality of life. All the really good stuff, but all the other stuff that comes with it as well. And so working through, I eventually went into the HR and culture space. And then I went in my own people management consultancy. And recently then I was then starting, I've in the process of launching then, as we said, Wildlife Unlimited. And I was thinking, well, I know at some point I'm going to have to bring people on board. What process am I going to have to go through? Pulling on all of my experiences, both in the HR and culture environment, the people management, but also that childhood, and all the businesses I've advised over the years. And I thought, well, I'm going to pull something together to help me prepare for that. And then as I was thinking about it, I thought, well, there's bound to be others who would benefit from it as well. And the ideal time to actually do a lot of this is before you become a boss. It's equally helpful when you are a boss, but the time to do it and the time you're really going to benefit is before you become a boss. And that, as we say, can be, where you have maybe virtual assistants, where maybe, I use a brand manager and she's amazing. And as well as advising me, I pull on all these skills and all these things I've worked on over the years with clients as well as on myself. And so that's really how Enlightened Boss came about. And when I was pulling the material together, I was looking at it, and initially I thought I would do a course, I would sell it as a course. And then I looked and went, there's too much here. It would be too overwhelming. People would, I've done those courses where you go, I have a life, I just can't dedicate myself to this. And that's why, and that's how it's come about, that actually I'm turning it into a membership community. So we can all share and grow together.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I'm all for membership and community. I love this group. And yeah. Michaela says, I love the name Enlightened Boss, which I quite agree with. It's a great name.
Well, I was toying with names, and I just did random writing and journaling and just thought the name is in there somewhere. And I thought, well, it'll appeal to people that it appeals to, it's kind of, your tribe. Yeah. So I thought, well, and that's kind of, that's my goal as well for me, that whenever, Wildlife Unlimited grows and Enlightened Boss grows, and I want to be that enlightened boss as well. I want that quality of life. I don't want to feel that my businesses are sucking the life out of me, that I want to kind of feel, yeah, I'm really proud of this, and I'm really proud of everything that these businesses bring to my life, and they enrich my life. Because I've seen the other side where, I've worked with clients where they do feel the businesses are just sucking the life out of them. And
indeed, yeah,
we didn't start out with the right and with all of this at the front of their mind, because naturally it was they started a business and then they needed people in. So they got people and just kept on and head down and got on and never even took a step back until they got to a point where they were actually their own health and their own family was suffering. And that's why I do not want that to happen to me.
No, absolutely. That's so true. And also, I think, you know, sometimes when you're growing a business that starts with you kind of become a boss by accident. You don't really mean to, that you know, you get help from somebody and then somebody else comes on and helps you do something else. And you realize that actually, even if they're not employed by you, you have in fact created a team, and then you do need to be in a position to manage that team and work with them. So I think it's really, you know, what you're saying is absolutely apposite. So Cathy, I know you've got some slides to share with us. Do you want to share your screen?
It's not left by PowerPoint, by the way, so don't worry about that. I left corporate life for a reason, and I'm quite happy to leave that behind. So, yep, I will get these shared now. Let me do, hopefully it works because it worked earlier. Yay, there I am.
Great.
So I'm going to shrink me down a wee bit. There we go. So yeah, so the whole point of this talk is all about, you know, who are you? And that kind of leads into, you know, when thinking about when you do have other people who are looking to you for guidance, other people who are reliant on you. And if you haven't worked out, you know, who you are, you'll soon realize when you're faced with either a difficult decision, a difficult situation, or it's not even so much that it's difficult, it's rapid, you have to respond quickly. And you might not always, I mean, the outcome might not always be what you wanted, but if you know you've kind of stayed true, it just makes it a little bit easier. And quite often, I mean, like whenever I do anything myself, or any kind of reflection, I like to start out with the meditation prayer. And it's really more because it's all about, you know, it's called loving kindness that you'll see all across the internet. But I think when you're doing any piece of self-reflection, we can be our own harshest critic. We can be extremely hard on ourselves. So I think this is a nice thing to start with by saying, you know, may I be happy, may I be well, may I be loved, may I be joyful, may I be at peace. And then may you be happy, may you be well, may you be loved, may you be joyful, may you be at peace. And just taking a breath and then begin the self-analysis, you know, so rather than just launching into, okay, let's get it done. So
that's lovely.
Why does it really matter in terms of knowing who you are? Well, we've talked about when it comes to making a decision, when it comes to rapid decisions, important things in life. When someone, it's that whole, you know, how other people talk about you. It's that impression you give. It's being clear about who you are. But it's one of those questions, well, who are you? And what does that really, and what's that made up of? So we all hear about being authentic to yourself. But if you don't know who you are, how can you be authentic? So, and the thing is, it's starting in simple steps as well. And this is kind of what I want to take you through. It's part of what it will be, what is going to be an Enlightened Boss. It's one of the very early stages of it. But I'm going to compress it down to just give you a bit of a taster as to, you know, what we can explore. So, I mean, these are images of me in terms of in different situations, different times in my life. And then you go, well, you know, and you'll have plenty of photos yourself. And then you ask, is this me? You know, is this all I am? Well, no, we're a lot more than what we have in our photos. We're a lot more than just one part. You know, I'm a daughter, I'm a partner, I have my businesses, you know, I'm a sister, I'm a friend, you know, I'm a network contact, I'm an introducer, I'm a whole host of things. But who am I to me? You know, what do I feel in my heart? You know, if I have to respond, if I have to make decisions, what do I want from my life? And get really, really selfish about it, because actually selfish is more like self-care as far as I'm concerned. So think about, is the person looking back at you who you want to be? And you just take a moment and think, you know, we're so busy getting on, we're so busy doing. Do you ever take that time to pause and go, or even time to reflect on things that maybe didn't go so well, things that did go well. What was my learning point in that? I kind of described that we all have awareness raising experiences, and sometimes you notice them, sometimes you don't. Some you notice more than others, but we all have them. And it's whether you take the time to begin noticing and to pause and to reflect and then think, am I happy with who I am when it came to that situation? So, I mean, I remember being at school, and I was at an all-girls school. So you imagine hormonal teenage girls can be rather bitchy in their comments. And I was in this crowd, and I think it was my first year at school. So I was about age 12, on my way into school, dad driving me in. And I was thinking about a girl in class who was being bullied by my crowd of friends. Now, I never said anything. I never joined in the bullying, but I never said anything to stop it. And I was silent. And I just sat that moment in the car on the way in and thought, what must it be like for her to know that she's on the same journey as me, but this is what she has to face in the day ahead. And I just felt this overwhelming wish to kind of go, I can't participate and I can't be silent anymore. I have to do something. I can't, by me staying silent, it says that I'm actually okay with this, which I'm not. And so from that moment, as soon as I got into school, I began speaking up against this crowd and trying to stop them and moving away and distracting. But that was my first time of kind of really that, awareness raising experience, that I felt there was something that was happening that felt off. It didn't feel right inside. So that was, I suppose, we all have those sorts of experiences. And that's when you begin to tap into, well, what are my values? What do I stand for and what do I stand against? Most people, you maybe have 3 or 4 that you kind of rhyme off the top of your head that are kind of, on a surface level, but you don't really know deep down, and you've never taken the time. And most people, it's not just, a handful, it was most people have never actually sat down, reviewed, written down what they think their values are, and then looked and thought, am I happy with those values? Is that the kind of person I want to be? But also being realistic about what the values are, writing down their actual values rather than their wish list. So what I'm going to do with you is to actually go through those values, just to give you a bit of a taster. And also part of it is also to help identify where there may be conflicts. For example, one of your values might be that, health is really important. But you're always ordering takeaways, you're chugging back the wine, you're helping yourself do all the salty crisps and all the salty snacks to go with the wine. You're not really getting out to walk much, you're not doing much movement, you're not looking after your mental well-being, but yet you say health is really important. So you've got this value and your behaviors are totally mismatched. So there's a whole host of things, that you can go into, where maybe you're career focused, but yet family is important and there's compromises you have to make. And it's what kind of feels right, what kind of jars. And so that's what I'm going to take you through, just a little overview kind of now. So this is the shorter version. So if you have access to pen, pencil and paper, and these are important to actually the physical act of doing, because it connects more with who you are rather than on the phone. Obviously, if it's safe for you to do so and you're not watching this while you're driving or doing something else. But if you get pen, paper, and we're going to go through a few things. Okay, so pause and think about who you are right now. Not who you would like to be, who you would wish to be. Who are you right in this moment, right in this space? And just take a few seconds, take a moment, just reflect. Now in the next slide, I'm going to show you a whole load of values. So there's quite a few on the list. And what I'll do is I'll read through them. But what I want you to do is I want you to pick 3 that you feel, not that you think, but 3 that you feel are connected to you. And the reason why I'm saying 3 is because we've got a limit on time, so you could spend forever. So we want to keep it to 3. So I'm going to read them out, and it'll just help in terms of you noting them down. Okay, so adaptable, adventurous, achievement, ambition, authentic, aware, blame, calm, caring, charity, collaboration, commitment, compassion, consistent, contribution, control, courage, creativity, curiosity, dependability, empathy, encouragement, enthusiasm, equality, ethics, excellence, excitement, fairness, family, friendships, flexibility, forgiveness, freedom, fun, generosity, gratitude, greed, growth, happiness, health, honesty, humility, humor, individuality, innovation, integrity, intelligence, intuition, joy, kindness, knowledge, leadership, learning, love, loyalty, making a difference, motivation, optimism, open-mindedness, passion, peace, perfection, performance, persistence, personal development, popularity, positivity, power, professionalism, punctuality, quality, recognition, rejection, relationships, reliability, resilience, risk-taking, safety, security, self-control, service, significance, spirituality, stability, success, thankfulness, traditionalism, trust, understanding, wealth, well-being, wisdom, and worry. So hopefully you've picked 3 from that list.
Gosh, I've got about 10 here, I think. So I'm gonna have to go through and whip some out. But if anybody's got their 3, please do post them in the comments. If you feel like sharing, don't feel compelled to, but it would be really interesting to see different ones. I might yeah,
so I'm not going to ask you what yours are because it's completely personal exercise for you to, if you want to share, that's fine. I'm happy to. But what I want you to do, if you've got 3, if you've got more, try and focus on 3. Because what I want you to do now is to prioritize those, the ones that you picked out, prioritize them in order of importance to you. And again, it's not using your thoughts, it's using your heart. What if you had to make a choice of one over the other? And if you struggle, then just compare, the first one with the second one, and then do them as separate. Don't try and list them all in one go if you find that difficult, or if likely, so you've got 10.
No, I've got down to 3 now. So Helen has very kindly shared hers, and they are caring, spirituality, and creativity, which I know Helen, so that goes well with her, I know. And I'll share mine if you like, which are currently courage, significance, and leadership.
And so how would you prioritize those? What would be the most important?
I think I would put courage first, actually. It kind of almost embodies the other 2, but I've never come up with that one. I've done values exercises, and as Michaela says, my programs have a high emphasis on values, so I do the values exercise quite often, but actually courage has never come through before. So great, thank you for that.
That's why sometimes by not taking too long initially to reflect, and just go with kind of that list. And the reason why there's a lot on that list and I go through it quite quickly and I don't labor is because it's that instinctive response.
Absolutely.
What immediately connects, that's your starting point. So now you've identified those 3, so that's based on who you are right now. I'm going to pose a few questions, and I don't expect a response. I'm not waiting for responses. It's just, these are questions I want you to ask yourself about those values and about you. So do any of them conflict with each other? Things like health, but having fun, and fun to use out partying and drinking and all of those things that mean you don't get round to the health bit. Is it things like, you care about the planet, so the environment is really important, but you buy fast fashion, you haven't adapted your life and your behaviors to actually demonstrate, because you're too busy getting on with life, career versus family, all those sorts of conflicts. What have your decision points been? Then ask yourself, am I living them? Am I actually living these values? Do I dip in, or actually do I apply them and use them? And could you think of, an example against each of those values that you've written down? How have you applied those values to the decisions that you have made? So if you think of any recent decisions or any circumstances you've been in, how have you applied those values to that situation? That you, hand on heart, that you're not recreating how you would like it to have been, but hand on heart, you actually did apply them. And so what are then, going back to the conflicts, what are the conflicts between my values and my behaviors? So they are two separate things, but the ideal being is that they actually become one, that you live and breathe by your values. And then also have a think about, do I consider and respect other people's values as much as I respect my own? Do I respect that theirs will be different to mine and are equally as valid to that person? Or am I imposing my values on other people and prioritizing my values over other people's? And we're not having there's no communication going around that in terms of understanding others' values. Now, put those values out of sight. And we're going to think about your future self. Now, for some, future self might be literally the 20th of August, 2022. And that's literally as far ahead as you can work. Could be next month, depending on what's going on in life. And that is fine, because it's your future self. Could be 5 years from now. You might be able to visualize who that person is. Now, take a moment to think about who that person is. Do you think they would have the same values, or might they be different? Your vision and goal for yourself, because we're going to quickly run through the exercise again. I won't read them out again, but we'll quickly run through it again. But really want you to think about who that future self is, who you're, even for when it comes to Enlightened Boss, when I think about the values I want to have as an Enlightened Boss myself, of Wildlife Unlimited, of Enlightened Boss, what does that look like versus my starting point as to who I am now? It's guaranteed that with life experience, with all of those things, your values some values will change, some will adapt depending on what your experience has been. So will your current values help or hinder you? And would your future self want your current values in that same order? Would there be a rejigging of all of those? What would you like to stop, start, and continue? So I'm going to go back to that list of values, and I want you to think about your future self. Who is the future me? And what are my values of me, either 20th of August, 2022, or in 5 years' time, what is my vision? Will those be the same 3 values that I will want at those time? Will it be the same in the priority that I put them in? Or will there be a change? What do I need? Who will I want to be in that future self? So just give you a moment to think.
Michaela has said that my future self needs to be more self-preserving, which is an interesting one, because she put her values as integrity, empathy, and generosity, which I can absolutely vouch for, but then says that she's just realized they're all outward looking, nurturing, and not self-preserving. So her future self needs to be more self-preserving, which is, I think, an interesting and valuable insight.
Absolutely. And that's kind of almost like the reason behind Enlightened Boss, was because I get in the people management side, I'm brought in, at the outward bit where things haven't gone to plan, where, and I see the suffering side of it, whereas the Enlightened Boss is all that inner work to actually to avoid as much as possible all that heartache down the line that I see and go, how did we get here?
Yeah.
You know, you've kind of, you know, what about you? You know, and often talking to the bosses of businesses going, how are you looking after yourself? You know, whenever you have people looking to you for guidance, it is, I mean, you give and you give and you give, but what about you? You know, how are you going to look after yourself? And that's exactly it. You know, we do. I mean, and I've been guilty of it as well. You know, and I say guilty of it because actually self-care, self-preservation, self-love is really, really important. Because for many of us, we are our business, we are our brand. You know, if we're not on top form, if we're not looking after ourselves, we're not looking after our businesses anyway. So that's why it's so important to start from within. And you know, selfishness is self-care. You know, there's a difference between selfishness at the harm of others, but selfishness at the self-care element, that's exactly what we need to be aiming for, because it's too important. Because otherwise you get burnout, you don't have the quality of life, and then you go, what's the point? And that's not where any of us want to be.
Absolutely.
Okay.
No, these are very, very interesting questions, Cathy. I'm really, certainly making me think.
Good. I was actually practicing this on my parents as well, who my dad is long retired, and he said, you know, if I'd been going through this at the time when I was running my business before I retired, he goes, I probably would have done a few things differently, you know, but it's that reflection moment. And I said, and that's only a taster of what's to come, Dad. You know.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
going then on to the, you know, the now that you've done that exercise, you know, it's that, you know, thinking about those different values, the me who I am right now versus me whatever that future self is. And it could be that for some of you, it's a case of actually, I want to be working only so many hours a week because I have a really good team around me that actually they don't need me involved in the day-to-day running of something or other. You know, they just look to me for maybe a once a week, maybe a couple of times a week, you know, kind of guidance on something. The rest of the time I can be doing, you know, something else, or I can be on my Malibu beach house if, you know, the sea water levels haven't risen so much, all those,
Yes,
you know, all those sorts of things, you know, that they want, you know. I think what's happened with the pandemic as well is people are questioning in terms of what's the quality of life I have, what's the life I want to live, you know, how do I want to be, how do I want to feel, and actually your business and your life should be all about enriching your life, you know, not taking away. And I fully believe that if you know you kind of create that balance, it means when things do go wrong, which it's life, they do go wrong, you know, you can dust yourself down a bit better, you can get back up a bit more, you know, it doesn't take as hard a knock as if you haven't done the self-care, you haven't done that. Actually, I know who I am, I know what I'm capable of, and actually I can bounce back. It is that resilience. You know, so that's why for me, that's why this is a very early stage exercise in the Enlightened Boss journey, because, and it's one to be revisited regularly, you know, not just kind of left, because none of this is written in stone. And it should be part of a reflection piece that we all do, you know, as life continues and we have different experiences. And, you know, it is very much a case of, you know, that's why it matters. You know, it's not just a simple thing, but I mean, like, it is a simple thing, but it's quite a personal thing. But it's really worthwhile, really, really worthwhile.
Absolutely. No, that's really, you're absolutely right. It's kind of simple, but it's actually, I mean, the way into it is simple, and the exercises, in a sense, that you've, you know, just suggested are sort of simple, but there's so much complexity underlying, and that you kind of excavate from those simple exercises, and the results can be really quite profound.
And I think that's why you need to kind of do it periodically, you know, and how frequently you do it is completely a personal kind of choice. You know, there's a balance to be struck, that you don't become obsessed by it. And it then, you know, it then cripples you rather than freeing you. You know, I think like a lot of these things, it's that balance of going self-reflecting and moving, self-reflecting and progress, rather than self-reflecting and spiraling down, which can happen all too often. My sister's complex mental health problems. So for her, you know, with the balance of self-reflection versus spiraling, you've got to strike that balance. And it doesn't have to be a mental health issue for that to be the case. You know, we can all go down the rabbit hole of self-analysis to the point where we just kind of are destroying ourselves. So it's balance. It's all about balance.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. Cathy, have you got any other exercises, or is that the kind of where we come to at this point, where we need to rest and consider?
That's kind of where that's kind of the pausing point. And that's why I decided Enlightened Boss needed to be a membership community rather than a course. You know,
well, I think it's a great idea. So you mentioned to me earlier that you had an offer for anyone in the group at the moment about discounted membership to the Enlightened Boss group when it opens up. So what would people get on the membership?
Okay, so the overall membership will be like a monthly bundle of support focused around one topic. So say, Monique, you saw a bit of the values bit, and there'll be more exercises to do. But the idea being is that it's spread out over a month, and a month of kind of noticing, reflecting. You know, it's not trying to do everything all at once, because that is too overwhelming. And I've been a part of those courses where it's been overwhelming. You know, there'll be things like videos and worksheets, guidance and support. I've got some people lined up who are willing to share their specialism and expertise in video interviews, and they don't know yet, but I'm going to ask them to do Q&As, you know, and get a different person each month. So I have someone who specializes in stress and mental health. I have my brand manager who will also explain on the practical in terms of thoughts around, you know, 21st century brand management, you know, and how that taps into your values and all those things. And I have someone who's going to talk about what innovation really means, because I think a lot of people jump on terms, and it's a case, well, what does it mean for you? What does it, you know, so not trying to get swept away by phrases and words. There'll be, every month, there'll be 2 live sessions, one with me, and one will be a live Q&A. And then the plan is then to get those specialists in. So it's not just a Q&A with me, it's a Q&A with them each month. And then connecting with the growing community, which will be, you know, worldwide, and sharing those experiences. But also, with specifically for the group today is the offer that I would like to make. And that's to invite you to become a founding member of Enlightened Boss. And as a way of thanking anyone who does come on board as a founding member, really to loyalty is so important. And as a way to thank anyone who does come on board, there's, as you'll see, there's a dedicated email address there called founding members at enlightenedboss.com. And I'm going to keep that live for as long as Enlightened Boss exists. Oh, so even as the group grows, and other email addresses are then managed by my team support, I'm committing to always answering personally any emails that come into founding members by founding members. Also, as a founding member, your membership is discounted. So instead of £49 per month, it's £27 a month, or £270 a year instead of £490 a year. So you're saving £22 a month or £220 a year on the membership price. And the plan as well, what I want to do for founding members, again, as a thank you, is that I will have exclusive prizes and giveaways that are just for the founding members group. There will be, you know, Enlightened Boss wide competitions and things like that, but there will be also something specific for the founding members group. So if there is a giveaway, you know, and the founding members, I'm not talking about hundreds of founding members. I'm going to cap it at the double figures. So it is going to be a small group. So any prizes I need to giveaways, you're in with a better chance of winning, when the team gets bigger. But yeah, so that's kind of, and why I say about the founding members email that I will always personally reply to is, and it's what Lucy and I were talking about earlier, is I've hired a virtual assistant to help me with a number of things. And a lot of the things that, a lot of the practices and approaches that are in Enlightened Boss, I've applied to that relationship with my virtual assistant. So things like, in order for a virtual assistant, so when you think about it, you're paying a virtual assistant for a service. So in order for your virtual assistant to do the best job that they can, the clearer you can be about what you need from them, the better they're going to be able to do their job, the more they're going to enjoy it, and the better engagement you're going to get. So before I then hired my virtual assistant, I sat down and worked out, okay, what tasks am I happy to outsource to somebody? So whether it be, you know, I have some of my accounting stuff is outsourced to her, but I don't have access to my bank accounts given to my virtual assistant, because it's a case of, well, I don't know her yet. I don't trust, you know, there's a trust building exercise. And so I went, okay, so certain things I'm happy, certain things I'll keep within. Okay, so before then, I then had an intro chat with her just to kind of, I'd already interviewed her and decided she was perfect. I'd interviewed a couple and she's called Petty. She's in Zimbabwe and she's absolutely brilliant. And I then had a follow-up chat with her and just talked her through, explained kind of what I was looking for, went into a bit more detail than at the interview. And then we set up an actual training, kind of a training meeting. So before going into that, I had organized everything that I wanted her to do for me. I organized in terms of, you know, the tasks and what was a priority, what wasn't a priority. You know, what had a quicker deadline than others. You know, the fact that my accountant's going to get all the information in September instead of December before Christmas, he's delighted. You know, so all these sorts of things, but also research for Wildlife Unlimited. There's bits I was happy to do, but a whole load of things that I knew if she was doing, it just freed me up, and actually freed me up to actually get Enlightened Boss sorted. You know, if I'd been trying to do it all myself, this probably wouldn't be until next year, realistically, because I wouldn't have had the headspace to actually think and do. But in that training session, I met her on Zoom and I recorded it. So I said to her, I'm going to record it and I'll save it in, we have a shared Dropbox, and I'll save the recording in that Dropbox. So you can go through, and whatever guidance I have given you that I've thought about before communicating and got my head sorted, then you can refer back to it. So it means then you don't have to keep rerunning back and back and back. And we have pretty much nearly every week, we have a 15-minute catch up just to see how she's doing, if she's any queries. I set up a Trello board for her, showed her how to use Trello, and she absolutely loves it. I think she's using it for other clients. And then we just share, you know, just contact on WhatsApp. So if there's something urgent, she can WhatsApp me. But apart from that, you see, because of taking the time to train and to record that training at the very beginning and to have everything clear, it means I have a better handle on where everything is. She knows what I'm looking for, and she just gets on and does, and she's really enjoying it because it's that clear direction. And that's where all of these things in terms of knowing from you what you're looking for, who you are, what you're happy with, what you're not, what you're willing to, what you're not willing, all of these sorts of things, that all ties in with Enlightened Boss and actually getting the best out of people.
That's absolutely brilliant, Cathy. You've just given us a whole load of brilliant tips there. So thank you very much for that.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, so absolutely, it's a great offer. So if you email founding members at enlightenedboss.com with the subject heading ABOO, then you'll hear back from Cathy. It sounds extremely valuable. And Michaela, one last thing. Michaela also says to you, Cathy, in terms of getting experts, there are gazillions of them in this group, which is absolutely true. So let us know how we can help you if you want to, you know, if you want to find experts on any particular subject. There's somebody who knows a lot about practically everything in this group. Excellent. So we'd be delighted to help.
Yeah, more than happy to have them more than happy to have those Zoom chats and have the Q&As and to share that knowledge among
fantastic. So I mean, you might
yeah.
want to anybody who's watching this might want to suggest themselves as experts, or when you're ready, Cathy, you're very welcome to post here and ask for experts who might like to come and talk, but we have plenty of them here. Yeah, that will be absolutely great.
I will stop sharing my screen now, will I?
Cathy, thank you so much for this session. It really has been fantastic and very enlightening and insightful. So thank you,
Lucy and Michaela, for inviting me and organizing it all. So
it's been brilliant. Thank you very much, and I'm sure we'll talk to you soon. And everybody else, thanks for being here. Thanks for watching the recording later, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.